SEAT, Social Vulnerability Self-Assessment Tool. SEAT is a social vulnerability self-assessment tool elaborated by EASIG within the Ecostress project. It has been developed starting from EASIG research on social vulnerability index calculation and piloting, and is based on SWOT analysis methodology. The SEAT is composed of two parts: an internal component identifying the sensitivity of a given local community to potential stress, an external component identifying the adaptive capacity that the local community can develop to cope with and respond to the impacts of a stress, whom it is targeted to. SEAT is the companion for policymakers to help them structure the relevant information needed to assess their community's vulnerability to external stress. It is meant as a tool for local administrators to support them in informed decision-making. Why and when using it? SEAT's full potential is best exploited if interpreted in comparative terms within a larger geographical or administrative area. To this extent, it should be used within the Raspberry framework. If such comparison is not possible, i.e. lack of data for a larger area, the SEAT represents an easy-to-use tool to define the starting point of a local community's social vulnerability assessment process. Easy to use. Users fill in the data gathering grid where they are asked to evaluate their local community in terms of both sensitivity and adaptive capacity for what concerns the following dimensions: social, economic, infrastructural, and institutional. Users can then proceed to a summary data gathering grid where main positive and negative factors are outlined. In addition, they can visualize where their community stands in the vulnerability index. A graph is then produced by the tool, detailing the percentage of positive and negative internal and external elements characterizing their system. Starting from here, users are redirected to possible action strategies for overcoming obstacles to their resilience-reducing process. Accessing SEAT. Log on to Ecostress website www.ecostress.eu. Select Social Vulnerability Self-Assessment Tool from the Media and Tools drop-down menu. Downloading SEAT. Users have now accessed the SEAT web page. To download the tool, click on Social Vulnerability Self-Assessment Tool. The file is downloaded automatically and, depending on your browser settings, it will appear at bottom left of the screen. Opening SEAT. The tool is an Excel file, which users can open by double-clicking on it. It is a basic Excel file, which is protected to ensure user-friendliness and which users can use by clicking on dedicated buttons. Home page. The home page offers A presentation and an introduction of the tool. B. A link to start the assessment. C. A link to watch the video tutorial on how to use the tool. D. A link to the tool's guidelines. E. A link to the Ecostress project. Assessing sensitivity and adaptive capacity. The assessment is made up of 8 phases, i.e. sets of questions, which are in turn divided in 2 parts. Phases 1 to 4, assessing the internal component aiming at identifying the sensitivity of a given local community to potential stress. Phases 5 to 8, assessing the external component aiming at identifying the adaptive capacity that the local community can develop to cope with and respond to the impacts of a stress. Phases 1 to 4, assessing sensitivity. Sensitivity of a community is determined by internal variables. Internal variables represent the pre-existing characteristics of that community, in terms of social, economic, infrastructural, and institutional factors that define its overall well-being. These characteristics determine the community's potential sensitivity to a future external stress. Phases 5 to 8. Assessing adaptive capacity. Adaptive capacity of a community is determined by external variables. External variables represent the capacity of the system in terms of social, economic, infrastructural, and institutional factors to cope with and recover from a present stress. The assessment. Each phase is composed by A. A guiding question, B. A set of factors to assess, C. A set of assessment options, D. A link to submit the assessment and proceed to the following phase. Users can assess each factor by clicking and thus selecting the appropriate assessment option. Once completed the grid, users can click on the next button to submit the assessment and proceed to the next phase. This procedure has to be repeated for all phases. Reviewing the operational values. Once the last assessment grid is completed, by clicking on the next button, users are redirected to the summary table, where factors previously selected as extremely negative or extremely positive are highlighted in red and green respectively. Depending on whether such factors belong to the sensitivity, i.e. internal, or adaptive capacity, i.e. external, components of the SEAT, selected factors will either appear as weaknesses, strengths, or threats, opportunities, in the left and right-hand columns respectively. Once users have reviewed the selected variables, they can either A. Proceed to a reassessment, or B. View the results by clicking on the relevant buttons. Viewing the results. The scores page allows users to A. See how the area community is set on a 0 to 10 scale, where 0 represents a total social vulnerability scenario and 10 a totally resilient one. B. See the interaction among relevant positive and negative factors both at the sensitivity internal and adaptive capacity external level. C. Proceed to a reassessment. D. Save the operational variables summary table and the results in a PDF file downloaded on their desktop. Using the results. By this data processing, SWOT analysis allows to define the assessment of a specific area, and at the same time, it helps to highlight any potential for its improvement by operating on the given elements, so as to emphasize strengths and opportunities, while limiting the negative effects of weaknesses and threats. Results highlight to users the potential for improvements functional to choosing a dedicated action strategy. An action strategy needs to be rationalized within the frame of a scenario, outlining the future by which, starting from the present situation, the area can establish effective resilience enhancement or vulnerability reduction policies and actions. Action strategies. The chosen strategy, the one considered to be the most appropriate for a specific future target, is the primary tool for action and the general frame within which decisions are made. When dealing with several realistic options for resilience enhancement or vulnerability reduction, it becomes necessary to devise differing action strategies. In this case, 3 types of strategies are taken into account: strengthening strategy, overcoming strategy, mobilization strategy. Strengthening strategy. This strategy is based on the strengthening of positive indicators, both internal and external to the area, assuming that by so doing, negatives will be critically abated and bypassed or absorbed by positives. Its application is suggested when it's possible to act on already large, strong, stable strengths and opportunities, so as to spur the rest of the system, transforming or mitigating the weight of few and irrelevant weaknesses and threats. Overcoming strategies. More cautious and systemic and less expansionist than the first one. It acts on positives, strengths, and opportunities in order to decrease, if not deactivate, internal negatives, weaknesses. The aim of this strategy is to preserve and balance positive factors, preventing major internal fractures. It is to be applied when, together with evident and substantial obstacles, there are also enough widespread strengths and opportunities to overcome the existing weaknesses.